Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? This is another one of our videos coming at you from a narcissist and a neuropsychologist walking in a bar. It is a Facebook group that we started to help with all sorts of mental illnesses and disabilities and afflictions people have. Today, my name is Enrique Reyes. I started the group with a bunch of people. Alex is here. He's one of the credible admins that we have. And of course, as all members have, and I do too, we have these mental health issues that we want to get down to the core of. And today we'll be talking about some of those issues. And from here, I'm going to have Alex take the lead. Alex, thank you very, very much for taking the time, spending with us again for another awesome, hopefully awesome video. And go ahead.
It's my pleasure, Enrique. Good morning to you and good afternoon to us over here in the UK, or good evening, in fact. So last week, Enrique and I had a great conversation about ADHD and how it affected our lives and, you know, the various other mental illnesses that can arise from untreated ADHD and how treatment helped us or didn't help us. So we're going to continue discussing ADHD today, and we're just going to expand on some points that we touched on in the last conversation. So I'm very much interested in advising people that suspect that they have ADHD, that if it's untreated, it can actually lead to developing other mental illnesses, such as anxiety disorders and depression, as was my case. I was diagnosed first with depression, then with generalized anxiety disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, and then finally with ADHD. And it's my belief that had the ADHD been diagnosed in the first place, I may not have developed the other disorders, which I did. So I'm getting this information from Medical News Today. And so obviously, as we know, ADHD involves inattention, hyperactivity, impulsiveness, or a combination of these. And it can give rise to stress, which can lead to depression. But also, I will say that I felt that stress was a massive factor of my generalized anxiety disorder. You know, I would excessively worry. I would, you know, overthink scenarios, and I get into panic and mild anxiety attacks, which I didn't understand at the time. I had chest palpitations and, you know, went into cold sweats and couldn't focus. It's interesting because, Medical News Today says that ADHD can affect a person's ability to pay attention, which might result in hyperactivity and impulsivity, which I must say, for me, it's calmed down as I've aged. Would you say that's the same for you, Enrique, or would you say that it's different for you?
To me, it was actually the same. I was diagnosed with just back 20 plus years ago when ADD was more prevalent versus ADHD, which is the main term they use now. So I was always the inactivity, and it actually got better, cured when I got into other treatment in my adult life. But it's always been as an adult without the hyperactivity.
Okay, you're lucky. I would say that, yeah, that my hyperactivity and my impulsivity has come down, but I need to pay attention to my nutrition, because when I have caffeine or high sugared foods, I do find that the same sort of symptoms lurk their head into my life again. So Medical News Today says people with ADHD may be more likely than others to develop depression and anxiety. Now, I have my theories as to why that's the case, and I'd be interested to know what your theories on that are, Enrique.
Well, let's just go back. What is your main view of focus on that, real quick? I just want to hear just a tidbit of what you think.
Well, I'd say that it's mainly accurate from what I've encountered when I've encountered people who have either been diagnosed or suspect that they have ADHD. They all have stories of, suffering from anxiety disorders or depression at some stage in their lives. So I'd say that it's pretty accurate, but I'm just kind of, wondering, for us, why do we think that there's a prevalence for us with ADHD to develop these conditions?
Well, if you look at the whole concept of ADD, you're looking at not finishing. Let's say many tasks that you start that don't finish. Let's say you are going to do a meeting, you're meeting someone. At any age, if you're going to meet someone in a playground or if you're meeting someone for dinner, it's just the compounding interruptions that we get that never get the task finished or done. So what happens over time, that builds up. And then you're no longer just looked at just about someone who's on time or can finish tasks. You're that person who never finishes stuff. You're that person who, because of distractions, loses things. You're that person who becomes someone who's not held accountable, whether in the workplace or as friends, or you blurt out or anything. What happens, that stacks up on you as anxiety because you want to do good, you want to meet that person, you want to finish the task, but because it's a miss, you actually have a mental block or it's actually a mental illness. Part of the brain is specifically prohibiting you from finishing that task.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, that collects over time and you build stress and anxiety because you know that you want to finish and meet someone, but 95% of the time you're not going to because of distraction. And over time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, that does build up and it's huge. And you get this anxiety over something you don't know what causes it. You don't know the cure. And that's only if you're diagnosed.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, there's two kind of main ideas that I want to discuss. So the first one that's arisen from what you said, it reminded me, as I mentioned in previous videos, I had an ex-partner who emotionally abused me and whose ADHD, I would say, is the most extreme that I've personally seen within anybody. And the sort of, difficulty for him was that he was a perfectionist. So that caused him depression within himself, because a key factor of depression can also be self-loathing, as I'm sure that it was for you at some stage, Enrique. Yeah. And so, that triggered his depression. Obviously, he didn't like himself because he felt that he could do better, and that he wasn't achieving the perfection that he wanted. He was very hard on himself, never satisfied. And then later, he would transfer that onto me or whoever else was around at the time. And then in terms of the anxiety that gets caused from it can be an internal thing, but I would also say that anxiety can be developed by how other people treat your untreated ADHD. I was badly bullied at secondary school by both teachers and schoolmates, and I was humiliated frequently in front of the class. So that made my confidence low, and that meant that, when I had to go and represent the school, um, other children were, surprised that, I had this insecurity within me, because obviously um, I'm kind of tall, I guess, as British standards go. And so I was the tallest kid in the group for most of the time. So people would say to me, "Oh, you're much bigger than me and you're more scared than I am." And, I didn't know how to rationalize it or to explain it. So I think anxiety can sometimes, yes, it can be an internal condition, but I think it can have external factors as well.
Alex, thank God you brought that up because, first of all, we're all different. From
Mm-hmm.
each aspect of our life, from trauma from birth to growing up through adulthood, we all react differently. I was told I was stupid my whole life, and these
Mm.
were from teachers. I
Yeah.
remember specifically the feeling I get being, first of all, being a minority in like an all-white school. There is that pressure that you feel, especially with what's going on now. People can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Being told by someone who's supposed to help you that you are stupid. I was put in the front of class and had such anxiety. I would be sweating. I didn't know what to do. And you see why I hated school. And
Yeah.
it took me up until recently with help from the group and from everyone's and giving me support that I'm not stupid. And you're
Yeah.
talking 12th grade to
Mm.
49 thinking that I'm an idiot. That does have a huge, profound effect on the way that you treat your life. And when our
Yeah.
peers are supposed to help us, when society is
Mhm.
supposed to help us, but shun us because they think they don't understand EDD, that's really, really sad. Thank you for bringing that up. That is a good point.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And likewise, thank you for all that you've contributed. I'm sorry to hear that you went through that, but you've come out on the other side and you're an inspiration to so many of us. And it makes sense, having these conversations, you and I get to know each other better. And like me, you're somebody who always likes learning. And I think that may come from the fact that, when we were younger, we wanted to learn and we just didn't have teachers who encouraged that within us. I mean, I must say that, I was lucky at various points that there were some teachers who did see great qualities within me and they encouraged it and they nurtured it as teachers should. But obviously, as I've said, there were many others who just had a negative impact on me, as they did on you, sadly. um, so going back to the link between depression and anxiety, they do say that depression is a common yet serious mood disorder that affects a person's feeling, thinking, and actions. It can cause strong feelings of sadness, loneliness, and a lack of interest in life activities. Now, it's interesting because it's sort of like that can apply to both, I mean, to all three, to ADHD, depression, and anxiety. So it's sort of like, how do you separate the three and which one do you prioritize? I mean, I'll start. So for me, I realized that the ADHD was what I wanted to resolve because, I just couldn't concentrate for long. Focusing was an issue. So was attention to detail. Um, so I realized that I had to resolve that. And fair enough, as soon as I started, initially medicating that, which I'll discuss further, um, my symptoms of anxiety and depression lessened. I started to really, go back to who I had been prior to going to school, an outgoing person, a confident person, an assured person, someone who can speak up for themselves. And,
Beautiful.
before I was very insecure, I was very introverted, and that's what obviously I realize now made me a target for my ex-partner, because I remember once after we'd had multiple arguments and we had separated and then we reconciled.
The
He
under,
said to
I'm sorry.
yeah he yeah, it's okay. Yeah, he said to me with a sort of wry smile, "You are intelligent." and and I thought that you were quiet and shy, and then he laughed, and I took that to mean that he meant I thought you were weak and possessive, but weak and passive, and that I could possess you, but obviously he wouldn't say it like that. So that was the thing that I struggled with for a long time, that people assumed because I was quiet that I was dumb, or that I was didn't have a backbone. But actually, I was the one that was observing everything going on, because everybody else was self-involved and, getting involved in dramas. And I just stood back. And there's times where you can use that to your advantage. And I don't mean in terms of social manipulation or anything like that, but I mean in terms of, I feel that that's what's given me compassion and empathy, because I grew up, having so many people confiding in me, that I feel like it sort of built me up for what was to come in life, of being a support to others and being an advocate of similar issues to you. So I'm just wondering for you, Enrique, how did you separate your narcissism and your ADHD and your OCD and your other conditions? Did you find that working with an overlap helped you, or did you feel that you had to separate them?
I went about it. It took a long time to help me fix my ADD. I took ADD medicine a long time ago. I took Celexa, I took Adderall, Ritalin. I was the first one in the area here actually to take, I think, Celexa. I've taken shots which were natural
Mm.
ADD medicine. And the great thing about it, and the horrible thing about it for ADD medicine for me, is that my body got used to it so fast. It would
Mm.
be any positive results would be done in 2 weeks, and then it would just start hurting my liver, my kidney, with the
Yeah.
process what usually happens, and then I got off of them. So there was no hope for me. When I got diagnosed, it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted and become aware. And then I essentially was on a plan to cure my own ADD. And basically, it was a cure to use nutrition and fitness to resolve some of the issues of ADD, which is hyperactivity, a little bit of that, hyper focusing, not focusing, and losing self. I wanted to get rid of the negative and keep the positive, which are high intelligence, creativity.
Yes.
And I just used, for me, unfortunately, the medicine, as I said, the route didn't work. And I did a natural route, which would be to naturally increase the neurotransmitters in the brain, which of course would be the dopamine primarily and serotonin. So I went that way. When you start looking at a natural cure for whatever way you do it, let's say psychotherapy, behavior cognitive therapy, meditation, a lot of times because everything, the good thing about it, if I can say that, is when everything's combined, everything does get fixed eventually. So I took a whole approach to it. So when I started going into therapy, talk therapy, when I started improving my nutrition and my fitness at a high level, and then becoming aware, reading everything I could, that I could about it, a lot of the symptoms dissipated. So it wasn't, I had numerology, OCD, I can explain that. I had lifelong OCD, depression, fatigue depression, malignant and COVID narcissism. I was empathetic and had ADD. So one doesn't just drop automatically. The great thing about it is that they all slowly are combined, and then they all combined work itself out. And for me, it all kind of worked itself out down to a low end of the spectrum. And I was lucky on that aspect. I didn't have to untwine them. But because of my awareness and my thought and how my brain works, I was able to see that one fix, let's say meditation, helps anxiety. Oh my God, it helps with the OCD. It helps with the depression all at once. So I try to do things that will help my ADD and all my other things in one basket. So it was really good to find the cures like that could help me blanket the cure on all my disabilities at once.
Great. Well, well done to you, man. It's so inspirational just hearing you talk about how you resolve that. It is a lot of work. It takes time and dedication and commitment, for sure. So I just want to touch on managing and mismanaging ADHD within the workplace. Now, I smile because this is something that I'm now aware of, but obviously at the time when it was affecting my work, I couldn't explain it to anybody, and people would just say, oh, you need to pay more attention, you need to focus more, and they just wouldn't understand, because obviously sometimes I was focused and very attentive and engaged, and other times I was off in my other world. So the sort of catalyst for me going back to a sort of partial diagnosis that I had when I was a child was that I was in a job that wasn't suited for me, and they were not happy with my standard of work. So I left that job, and it was very stressful for me at the time and worsened my anxiety disorder and depression as it would. So that's what made me revisit that. Now, in terms of when I managed my ADHD well, I realize now, I regulated my nutrition, and I had a routine. I think it's very important for people with ADHD to have a set routine. When I had that set routine, when I would take my breaks, when I would take my lunch, everything went fine. Then, within a working environment, within most jobs, you can't always set things towards a schedule. So that would increase my symptoms of ADHD because I'd become unnerved, and that would trigger my anxiety surrounding it. So I would say that, managing versus mismanaging, you can manage ADHD, but my therapist said something to me that has stayed with me, which was, when we were talking and, I was in the prospect of starting to work with somebody else, he said, but what do you feel that you should do that you didn't do before when you were first employed? And I said, talk about my condition. And he said, exactly. So, you know, I would encourage people to disclose their condition, but I do understand the anxiety surrounding that. Some people have been discriminated for having ADHD or other mental health disorders all of their lives, and they don't want to face that with their employer. I do understand. But I now realize, had I disclosed my ADHD, had I been diagnosed firstly, and had I disclosed it to my employer, it would have worked in my favor. Um, so, you know, there's a catch-22 because obviously you don't know how every employer is going to react towards you sharing that diagnosis. But I would say for you, you have to put yourself first. And I think it's easier for people to understand things when they have a label with it. Unfortunately, we shouldn't have to rely on labels, but you know, if you just say, oh, I'm inattentive and you know, I find it hard to focus, people will think, oh, you know, he's a daydreamer, he's an airhead. um but if you say, you know, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, what's that? It's this, that, XYZ, then you know, people generally are more receptive towards helping you because they kind of know her terminology to use around it. So I was wondering for yourself, Enrique, if you've had experiences of when you managed your ADHD well within the workplace and when you mismanaged it.
Well, one of the jobs I've had, let me preface that, was when you get diagnosed, it's like, and it's almost like you put the name on something because you think all these things, and then you realize that it is a mental disability. You don't really have, it could be genetic, mostly, or it could be from, passed on from your mom, your dad, and it's just something you can't really control. And since it puts a name on it, it's almost like a big relief. But there aren't reliefs in the aspect of like, well, I'm going to get better tomorrow. I'm going to get better. It's going to get better in the workplace. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's the negative aspect because people just want someone who's perfect. And especially with a job that doesn't suit you, like jobs that suit people with ADD, maybe going out for the kill, which might be a criminal defense attorney, but not doing any of the work to get there. Ambulance chaser, something like operating a roller coaster. I mean, these high energy jobs to match the ADD. But when you're more somber, let's say a law library workplace, you might be all over the place if the ADD isn't watched. So it is a catch-22 on matching the job, I think, with the ADD. And when it's not, some people don't know what it is, and they do take offense to it, and they do treat you differently. And for America, it's different. I think George Bush passed the Americans with Disabilities Act for the United States, which means you can't discriminate for a handicap.
Yes.
One of those things is actually mental health, and it's in there, but it has to be life. One of the things is life altering things, and people can say, well, learning is my disability, but it has to affect your life. So it's in there, and it's nice, and you're federally protected. But in the other hand, to have a life-altering situation, people don't see, especially in the workforce, only allows you to make recommendations in the workforce. It might hurt you more than help you. My personal experience, I chose a job that it allowed me to use like my bartending and catering and going. I can literally go for 14 hours straight, and that supplies the other half of my ADD, which is I'm just always studious. I can hyper focus. So I kind of did a few things to match my ADD, not to pick something that the unchecked ADD is not good at. And then I tell people, and they kind of know me, and they kind of get away with it. And catering for me, you're not getting a lot of physicists in catering versus someone in a law office. So they're more lax with me and being spontaneous and being a big, open, big, type person. And that job allows that. So again, I brought up many times, having a job that fits your ADD is good. And that's kind of what I did in my last job right now. And one of the jobs actually probably the best for it, if you don't want to get discriminated or you're having a hard time finding a job, is your own business and doing what you love. And that's your work, your own time, your own hours. And unfortunately, if you don't do productive work, you don't have an income in. But it does alleviate some of the issues of discrimination in the workplace, people not understanding, and maybe being fired because they don't understand it. And that's the choice that they will make eventually. There's always someone without ADD there that might do a better job.
Yes. Yes, all very well said, and I agree. And I will just add another short story. So I do believe that we have similar legislation in the UK as well. But having said that, I remember when I was working for a small company, and there was a guy who had Asperger's and ADHD both diagnosed, and he was certainly discriminated against. I mean, he was accused of being a risk towards girls, and there was nothing in his behavior to suggest that. And it was obviously that manager was transferring whatever had happened to them or to someone they knew onto this person. So it's stigmatizing. And it's that stigmatization that stops people from getting help, and that can worsen depression and anxiety. Because, I know that probably the manager feels, oh, that the guy would not have been aware, but, I'm sure in some ways that he was being treated differently towards the rest of us. And then that made me insecure because I realized that I um, had something like ADHD. I wasn't fully diagnosed then, but I was on my way to getting a diagnosis. And so then that made me withhold, my own condition when I should have shared it. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, I would say. But yes, it is good that we have those laws in place to stop active discrimination such as that. So on to the next topic, the penultimate topic. Um, Treating ADHD with medication, non-stimulant versus high stimulant. Now, I have experiences of both medications, as I've mentioned in other videos. So first, I went onto a non-stimulant called atomoxetine. And really, I should have stopped at 60 milligrams, but I kept on thinking, oh, the higher the dosage, is going to cure me, etc. And then it was making me lethargic and sleeping a lot during the day. So I decided to then go into the high stimulant, which, as I said, my psychiatrist believes partly triggered my psychosis. And, I suffered with terrible insomnia. So, there's a catch 22 to both medications. And I was reading in this Medical News Today article that I've been quoting from that some ADHD medications can actually worsen depression as well. I mean, I was lucky because I was on antidepressants, so that's possibly why my depression didn't worsen. But I'm wondering for yourself, Enrique, if you have any experience of using non-stimulant or high stimulant, or if you've observed people using it, and what your attitudes are towards treating ADHD with medication.
Yeah, well, as I said before, I've had a lot of experience with ADD medicine. I think I was saying Selexol, I think it was Concerta, Adderall, Ritalin. Then I had I think it was a natural homeopath type, because every one that I took, I got used to, and I never knew that was an issue. I never knew that you can just get used to stimulants, and that's what it is. And I realized that what's happening in my body is that it would do its job. I would get the dopamine rush, and we again, so it started out at the normal doses, and people who don't know, you start out at a dose per milligram, so 5, then you go to 10, 15, and then you can go up, and if it doesn't do anything for you, you start jumping up 20, 30, 40, and you find out where that sweet spot, and automatically. For me, it just hit, and then I could study Dickens, I could study Nietzsche, and it was just perfect. But then the high came down, and then I just felt like how I always felt. The problem with me again, so it only lasted 2 weeks. So I would take the medicine, and then any positive aspect of it would be gone. And what happens a lot of times, the side effects could be sleeping paralysis, sleep apnea. You have problems going to sleep. You have problems with your stomach, digestion. There's so many side effects. What happened to me was a huge, sharp pain in my side, my kidneys, and then also my liver, and it just the metabolism of it when it didn't get absorbed, it just make my body bellow with pain. That was enough for me to stop. So after going about 3, 4 different drugs and the natural one, I stopped altogether. I loved it when I was on, but it's bellowing pain and taking care of my body.
Yes.
They're not doing it. So that's when my journey was started, with trying to figure out everything I knew about ADD, I got all the books, Driven to Distracted, all the doctors I looked at, everything I could find out, and then make my own assessment, and then figure out a way and how to get better naturally, and kind of figure out what happens with high stimulant, non-stimulant, basically medication for ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the journey
Yes.
that I'm now, which is it's always continual. It's to do a natural way to how to get better. And let's let me make one point right now. First of all, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor. Anyone
Neither
that
am I.
taking medicine at any time, don't sway to you at any time. But I'm the way that I got better is because I came down on the spectrum of being a narcissist. I came down from on the OCD. I came down. Those two are also, they said, is non-curable. ADHD, I came down dramatically on that, and I was more aware, and I was able to figure out how to get the same results as medicine would give me naturally: diet, fitness, support, group, tribe mentality. So first, I'll be the first one to say, if you need to take medicine, listen to your doctor, talk to your doctor, or listen to your doctor. I'm just offering a different way that I thought was best for me.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for sharing that. And as we've both said, we're not practitioners. We don't work within the medical field, but we're just talking about how it personally affected us. And in my own case, I am hoping to get back onto a non-stimulant medication, but I'm very, very conscious that I will not be going to the highest dosage as I did last time. I will just, go to a certain dosage, and then the rest of it has to be self-work, self-improvement, and self-management. So now going on to our final topic, the impact of those ADHD isn't real articles. Now, for many years, these have been the bane of my life. Friends and relatives on Facebook share them, they circulate, they seem to trend at this moment. There is an article that I read in preparation for our conversation today, Enrique, by Dr. Robert Berezin, and the title is No, There Is No Such Thing as ADHD. So to give a brief analysis of what Dr. Berezin says, he says that, these treatments are to strip away a child's individuality, and, to sort of, compress us all into being the model child, and that, you're taking away children's creativity and their personalities. Now, here's my opinion on this. I don't see any solutions by Dr. Berezin on how to treat ADHD symptoms, and the same within the other ADHD isn't real articles which I've read. There's never a solution. And I joined a group which was against medication, and I would say that they were pill shaming as well. Pill shaming is when you shame somebody who's taking medication for any ailment, but mainly for mental illness. There's been a lot of stigma around that. So within this group, when I said, all right, so if I don't go on medication, what am I supposed to do? And they made sort of, minor recommendations, because I think for some people, yes, maybe their ADHD is mild enough to be able to treat it without medication. But for many others of us, we do need, that extra assistance. We do need, that attention. And so I feel that these articles don't really serve any good, because what they do is they stigmatize people who treat ADHD. And, parents are made out to be monsters because, they put their children on medications. So people say, oh, they're drugging their children into being zombies. And anybody who's raised a child with ADHD knows that, at times it can be very challenging. So who are we to judge parents if, for the interest of their child, and yes, themselves to an extent, they believe that medication is going to calm their child down so that they can be attentive at school, and so that they can, be a part of the family? Because a lot of people with ADHD, untreated, end up outsiders. My ex is a prime example, and me to an extent. It isolated me socially quite a lot. So I feel that these articles really do further the stigma. And then another reason that they annoy me is because they encourage people not to get help and not to treat their issues and to just think, oh, it's all in people's heads. There's nothing wrong with me, which again is my ex's mentality. And, you know, my ex lost his business, lost his relationship with me, couldn't maintain any friendships, was estranged from his family. So, you know, there's a heavy price to pay if you don't treat your mental health, because yes, obviously there are some people who will unconditionally love you, but bearing in mind that I unconditionally loved my partner and then I grew to dislike him so much. So bearing all of that in mind, I personally don't see any good in these articles. I think that they're stigmatizing, and I think that they're being shared irresponsibly, because if you say there's no such thing as ADHD, what then is your explanation for the symptoms that people have? You know, there has to be some kind of, you know, acknowledgement of that. You can't just pretend that, oh, it doesn't exist because I don't have it and my children don't have it, which I feel is the case. So I'm wondering how you feel when you hear or read or encounter those articles, Enrique.
Well, they're all trash.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trash, and they should lose their license, because there has to be a positive aspect, and there's a big disconnect with psychologists and doctors because they want to look only at the science, which is fine. It's what I do, but you also have to put your common sense, outside the box thinking, which we have, and intelligence into a solution. So let's say we throw away everything. Okay. Let's say we said it's genetic. How does that help me? It doesn't help me. It does help me if I figure out that it's a pattern behavioral issue, right? So we go back a little bit and we say it's genetic. Okay, so part of your brain is deformed a little bit. It's a little underdeveloped. The chemical delivery system is not there. Then we know how to get that, right? We know that neuroplasticity works, right? So we're going to get a plan on how to naturally make the neuroplasticity highest level possible. And there's one, right? Behavioral issue. Okay, so if it's because I grew up in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and someone telling me I'm stupid, and then to do one thing and I fail over and over and over, let's remove that child or that individual from the environment. So you change your environment, right? Okay. Let's say they do need medication. Okay, you get the right dose along with self-help work. So self-help work is being open and aware. Is the first part, like I said, is helping the brain with the maximum amount of neuroplasticity that it can get, the maximum of natural or chemically altered medication to help the chemical rise you can get. What do you do for your thinking, your thought process? Have you done meditation? What do you do every day for self-affirmations? I am smart. I am creative. What do you do with your environment? Is it changed? Are you going into another stressful work environment? It's doable. You have medication, right? And then there's the other work to help address the problem. I want to know in an article, not what everyone has said 1,000 times, but practical ways and intelligent ways based on science, based on common sense, and based on love and compassion from someone on how to go from A to Z. And like I said, they're trash. And I would have to actually look at it to get me that actual article, which we're going to list down below. And I want to get the exact doctor and see what his thoughts are, and like to see read the paper like I always do, and make my own notes from it. But again, it's very simple. What if it isn't a real disability? And again, let's go real fast. If it alters your life, then it's usually a mental disability. If I'm a narcissist and I'm violent toward people, and I have 8 of the 10 diagnostic traits for it, narcissist, yeah, and it's diagnosed by psychologists. ADD, if it doesn't just affect me in high school, but it runs my life, that is when you have ADD. We're not just it's not phantom, and you can see the anger in myself and my mind because of you touched on something that we all deal with. It's nothing. Oh, just get over it. It's garbage. You just don't understand. I can't get over it. It's not that simple. So, in closing, for what we're saying is that I like to have a dual-fold attack for ADD. If you want to get rid of the labels, fine. I never use them again. Look at the traits. Let's go backward to see where the traits came from, and let's do a synergistic plan to go forward consistently and be aware of yourself and be accountable for your actions. So you go from A to B to C to Z. And guess what? On that journey, you might get better in probability. you are going to get better, because this is a curable disease. Just like if you want to lessen the trait for OCD, depression, and for narcissism, it can work, but it does take work and time. And I do believe that method could be helpful.
Yes. Thank you for everything that you said. I completely concur with you. You know, so I'm going to end with a question. What do you feel has been your greatest achievement from treating your ADHD? And I'll let you answer first.
For me, I believe, and again, respect to everyone who has it, respect to where you are on the spectrum, from it running my life to not running my life. I think I've conquered a lot of the traits from ADD, and reading was a big part. I couldn't read. I now could read giant passages and retain information, and it made me the person that they said I wouldn't become because of doing this. I don't do that. I can focus, retain, and I get smarter as the months go on, because I believe it helps. So conquering ADD is probably the best thing for me. I'm happy.
Well done, Enrique. I mean, your story, I'm sure, is one that many people will share across the world. I just find it heartbreaking that teachers of our generations found it easier to write off their students rather than, you know, engage with them, see what was wrong, and find a way of, you know, helping them work past that. But everything happens for a reason, I always say, good and bad. So I would say that my greatest achievement of treating my ADHD so far is that I have developed emotional awareness. I always had compassion for others as far back as I can remember, but I didn't know how to manage it. I didn't know when to apply it. People were right when they said I was too nice or too soft or too giving. So I had to learn boundaries, and
Yes.
you know, gaining thank you. Gaining emotional awareness has enriched my life. It's improved my relationships within my family, with my friends. Now I'm blessed to be in a very happy, secure, romantic relationship, and life is just as good as it's ever been. You know, there's so many positive things happening for me at the moment. And I just want to say to people watching this who may feel that they're not in the same place, as long as there's life, there's hope.
Awesome. So Alex, thank you for all your research and time.
Likewise.
Everyone knows I have 3 other admins that work hard, and we have articles coming out every 2 weeks, every week. So videos. So I want to thank again Alex for his time and his information. It might seem like you might have heard this before, but it's coming from people who actually have the disability and have practical ways, and just trying to get in discussion here that we're in the lockdown Zoom to get the information out there all over the world, natural firsthand information that you can hopefully use and help improve your life. Alex, thank you again. Until next time, in the next video, I'm going to stop the record, and thank you guys. Alex, stay on.